Now that the fillets are pretty dry, mostly dry I guess, we can go ahead and attach the upper body tube to the lower body tube. Now remember, we assembled this ahead of time. The shock cord is already mounted on the inside. And so this is just going to go in like this. So here we just need to put in a bead of glue right along the inside. Okay, now remember I had that little crushed part here, so I'm going to try and get a really good even amount of glue right up to the edge, and hopefully that'll help hold that crushed part in a better position, and that way give us a strong bond all the way through. Okay, so now I'm just going to add this, push it down, give it a turn back and forth a little bit here. Okay, and to help keep that crushed area in the right place, I'm going to wrap this with a layer of masking tape. Okay, and this may cause it to take a little bit longer to dry, but that's okay. Okay, and once again I'm going to set that aside. Okay, next I want to come back to the nose cone, and usually the custom Rockets kits have really nicely formed nose cones. They don't have any seams or anything in them, and they usually have a really nice polish to it. This one's a bit dinged up, like maybe it got damaged in transit or during packing or something. So if you're going to paint this, I recommend first sanding it lightly with some 220 to 320 grit sandpaper. If your nose cone is pristine, I would leave it alone, because I think they really look good right out of the package. But in my case, I really need to do something with it. So I'm just going to take some 320 grit sandpaper here and just lightly sand all the way around it. And this will just roughen the surface enough that paint will stick readily. With that really glossy surface, some paints will not stick, and you end up with them peeling off after a flight or two. Okay, so just make sure you get the whole surface area there, but you don't need to go deeply at all. And you'll especially need this step if you're going to use acrylic paints. I think this is still polystyrene, so spray paints of the typical sort will still stick to it, reasonably so even without the sanding. Okay, once I've got it sanded, now I'm just going to, you can take a tissue or a paper towel and wipe it down. I like to use a little bit of rubbing alcohol, just because it dries quicker and it traps the dust. Okay, and so now you can paint this whatever color you want. I'm probably going to just paint mine black again because I like that original color. Okay, and you want to decide if you're going to paint this a different color than the rest of your rocket, then I suggest painting it separately and then hooking the nose cone and parachute to it. Okay, if you're going to paint the whole rocket the same color, then you can do it either way. Okay, either do it separately or just put the whole rocket together and paint it. Nowadays, most model rocket kits come with a pre-assembled parachute, but the custom kits come as a parachute kit and do require some assembly. So just take out the parachute itself, and then we've got some little discs here, and these have a perforated middle, and that's what this is notifying us. So in prior models in earlier production runs, this just had a circle here, and the idea was to put the string between the parachute plastic and the circle, and you just stick the two together. And they found that the adhesive was not sticking very well that way, and shroud lines were coming loose. So we're going to do it in a little bit different fashion now. this open too. There we go. Okay, so go ahead and set the other parachute parts aside. And just lay this out. Okay, so to follow the steps printed on here, we're going to go ahead and cut this out with scissors, or you can use a hobby knife. And then this comes as one long string, and so you'll need to cut that into 3 equal pieces. And then down here, this is the part that's been changed. So instead of taping the shroud line on, we will put a reinforcement tape on there and then tie it. Okay, once we have that, then we're going to take the reinforcement buttons here, and you can take a pencil here and go ahead and pop out the middle. All right, that just stuck to the other side. That's fine. We'll just ignore it. All right, so we're going to put these one at each corner. Now you can take the point of a pencil or pen and just poke a hole through. And then for the shroud lines, go ahead and pull this off and kind of gently tease this apart, so we don't form a bunch of big knots. Okay, and then what we have to do is just kind of make a big loop here. And then you can pull on one end. So down here I'm pulling on this loop, and that's pulling the other end up through my thumb. And I need to get all of that excess to be the same length. Okay, that was pretty close. Alright, so then once you got them really close, on one end, come through and then snip it so that all 3 are the same length here. Okay, and now don't let go of them, but draw all 3 through till you get to the other end. Okay, and here again you're going to cut these all off even. Okay, and then we're going to tie one shroud in a loop between every 2 corners here. So just feed that through, and then I'm going to tie 2 half hitches. And if you have small fingers, this is going to be easier. The main thing is here is to try to keep the amount of string you use on each side the same. That's what we want there. Okay. And after we're done, if you're worried about your knots coming undone, you can put just a little teeny touch of white glue or wood glue on that knot. And it doesn't take much at all, just a little small amount. All right, now I'm going to go to the adjacent corner with the other end of that line. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay, so I have one loop there at 2 adjacent. Okay, and now I'm just going to complete this all the way around. So here I have the completed parachute, and now I'm just going to find all the shroud lines here. Okay, and just gather those up onto one of your fingers. And then I'm going to hold this by the middle of the parachute sheet. All right, I'm just going to pull taut here. And if everything worked out well, then all of those corners should be pretty much even with each other, with all the shroud lines equally taut. All right, now one of those looks like it's just slightly looser than the other, but it's close enough. Okay. Now, according to the instructions, this loop is then tied directly onto the adapter piece. Okay, and to do that, you have to put all 3 of those loops through here. Okay, and then you have to pull them back out. All while not losing the tension. Okay, and then you pass the entire parachute through this big loop, and that will tie this down. Now, I don't like to do that on any of my model rockets. I prefer to attach a snap swivel like this one here. And this gives me the option of making the parachute easily removable. We're going to start the same way, so take those loops and kind of thread them down, and you're going to pass this through the swivel end of the snap swivel. Okay, and then reform your loop of loops here on the other side. Again, keep the rest of the shroud lines taut so they don't change length. And then I'm going to pass the entire swivel through that loop and then pull that taut. Okay, and I'm going to come back to my parachute, make sure I didn't get too far off. Okay, not too bad. I think one of those shifted a little bit. And if you want, you can just loosen this up and try it again. Same is true if you do it directly to the adapter. But I'm close enough here, I'm not going to worry about it. And now what you can do is take just a little touch of wood glue or white glue and stick that right on the knot. Might need to get a little bit more on there. There we go. Okay, and these particular shroud lines are either nylon or polyester, and they don't like to hold knots well. So do go ahead and do this step. Okay, and then once that dries, that'll keep that knot from coming undone. Now, as I mentioned, if the knots that you made down here on the parachute sheet itself look like they're going to come undone, you can do that same trick. Just put a little touch of glue on the knot, work it in, and let it dry. Okay, and then when you're ready, just open up the snap swivel, Put that on there, close it again. Okay, now these snap swivels you can buy in the fishing section of department or sporting goods stores. And it doesn't really matter what size you get. What matters is the size of the snap itself. Anything that you can get that will fit this will be more than strong enough to hold your rocket. Here I've applied 2 coats of flat white primer to both stages of the rocket. And this is going to help bring out any imperfections that are still left before you go on and do the final painting. So for example, you can still see a little bit of the grain here. So my sanding sealer didn't do a perfect job. And that means that next time I'll use more sanding sealer, or I'll just ignore it, which is what I'm going to do this time. Okay, but if you really want to get rid of remaining grain here, the best thing to do at this point is to use a filling primer. And what you do with that is you spray the primer on, you sand it down, you spray another coat on, you sand it down, and that builds up in any of the remaining grain there. The drawback is you go through a lot of primer and a lot of sandpaper doing that. So it's kind of up to your own aesthetic there. Okay, up here at the joint, we've got a little bit of a gap here, and you can fill that in also with that filling primer, or you can use some model putty or some wood filler in this, and I'm probably going to use the latter. And this all just depends on your own goals for the model rocket. So do you want a rocket that's got a perfect finish, or you just want something that's acceptable and you can get it on the launch pad as soon as possible? And my own tends to follow that latter one a little bit. I'd like to see a reasonably good rocket sit on the launch pad and fly. Okay, down here on the booster stage, look for kind of the same things. We've got a little bit of kind of a paint splatter there, a little bit of stuff off here, little slivers of balsa, things like that. The primer is going to help solidify those, and it actually makes them easier to get rid of. So a little bit of sanding here is in order with 320 to 400 grit sandpaper, and after that I can go ahead and apply the finish coats onto both stages. At this time I have the paint done on the sustainer and on the booster, although I'm still waiting on the nose cone. At this point my paint is finished, and I've applied the only decal that comes with it. So this is a wrap that simply goes all the way around here. And they show it toward the top of the rocket. You can basically put this anywhere as long as it doesn't interfere with a fin or a launch lug. And the only thing remaining now is to connect the recovery system. So whether or not you use the stock elastic cord or you put on the Kevlar, either way, I do recommend, instead of just connecting the parachute to the nose cone, is come down a little ways on your shock cord, about a third, quarter to a third of the way down, and just tie a loop here. Okay, and then you can tie your parachute to this, and the advantage to this is that the nose cone will hang straight down under the parachute instead of off to one side. That often makes it spin the parachute and get it tangled up. Okay, so once you got your loop in there, and again, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. It's an option. Go ahead and tie a double knot of your shock cord into the nose cone here. Okay, make sure you got a good tight knot. And then if you're using Kevlar, put a drop of super glue on the knot. If you're using elastic, put a drop of wood or white glue on the knot. And in both cases, it just helps keep that knot from coming unraveled. Okay. Also, if you have excess material on the free end here, go ahead and cut that back, but not all the way to the knot. You just want it short enough that it won't potentially get caught between the nose cone shoulder and the body tube. Okay, so usually about half a centimeter or so it will be adequate. Now I can take the snap swivel and attach this either to my loop here, like that, or if you go the traditional method, just tie this or clip this on next to your shock cord and just close it up here. There we go. Okay, so that's all connected that way, or if we go the other way here, okay, and this is actually easier than trying to connect it to the nose cone. So either way is fine. And here's my Vanishing Point fully assembled. Doesn't quite fit under the camera here. Okay, but I expect this to be a very good flyer. Probably go very high. It's nice and streamlined. Not a lot of stuff to get in the way. So I hope you had fun building this, and have a great flight and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.